So, as Rafa said, but also as Bibi said, it's about reconnecting the human with the technological, and that's what the Restart project has been finding over and over again since the first day when we met in a pub in North London with a couple of friends who knew a bit better than us how to tinker and say, well, let's have a go and see who needs something repaired and who would like to share some repair skills. And there you go. 2.5 years later, we have run over 80 events in London alone, and we have groups that have started in 5 other countries and groups that are interested in starting in maybe 15 other countries. And we continue to learn that it's about humans first, but also about the technology. So as you see there, one of our wonderful restarters, David, who's been passionately joining the movement and been active in our events since last year, since the beginning of last year. It's about creating a way to reduce the fears we have collectively about the black magical boxes that we are so interested in, so attracted to, always affected by the beautiful ads around them, but the moment something goes wrong, we feel completely powerless. And together we can change that. There's an ecosystem that has emerged of information sources that help us circumvent planned obsolescence and the lack of official support from companies. But the human aspect is what makes the most difference in articulating a response. And that's important because you can watch 1 billion YouTube videos, you can find 1 billion spare parts on eBay and other places, but the first time you're going to be there trying to desolder a component and substitute the part, you find yourself at a loose end, and that's when restarters come handy. We are a social enterprise, as you pointed earlier, which means that on top of running 80 community events, we've started at the beginning of 2014 running what we call Restart pop-ups, where we go into a company, a cultural institution, a corporate event, or a university, and run a drop-in repair clinic where people can have a go outside of the community events at taking something apart and collectively repair it, or at least troubleshoot it, and figuring out in a completely independent way whether something is repairable to begin with. And in most cases, things are repairable, more than we have been convinced. That every time we have an initial conversation with someone, it's all about, oh yeah, nowadays it's much cheaper to replace, to buy something new. The reason people believe so is because the information around the repair and repairability, while widely available on the internet, it requires a lot of time and dedication to kind of make sense of it all. While of course everyone knows where the closest fruity store is to buy a new device. We've also tried to put an emphasis on working particularly with people who have not necessarily traditionally have had enough access to repair encouragement, and Janet has been running very successfully in the past 6 months a women's Skillshare group called Rosie the Restarters. If anyone is interested, starting, well, at the beginning of the year, we'll hopefully be able to run those again. And by doing this, we'll keep learning about wonderful repair sources in our own communities, and that's the key aspect of all of this. Repair skills have been marginalized, whether by the disappearance of repair shops or repair as a business, and as a result of that, there's wonderful people that still have repair skills whether because they used to repair commercially or whether because they just like to do it, but they've not had the opportunity to see such skills valued by society, by our communities, by running these events which have been pop up, trying to always reach out to a new community center, a new venue, a new part of town. We keep discovering such skills, and that show how actually we can look at communities in completely different ways if we start thinking more about the resilience and repair as an important muscle in society. As I mentioned, we have an expanding community globally, and one of the interesting things that has happened is we have started to have events being run in Tunis, as well as a lot of groups, of which I'm incredibly proud, as you can imagine, in my home country, Italy, and a few other events in the US, in Canada, in Israel, and we were increasingly receiving interest from countries all over the place, from India to Kenya, Zambia, South Africa, elsewhere as well, which is quite interesting because often these are countries where the repair muscle hasn't really disappeared, and we're always trying to challenge people to think twice before assuming that a restart party per se is needed in such a place, and what does it really mean to run that kind of event in a place where the informal sector, for example, might be still incredibly valuable as a source of jobs in the industry. You don't want to compete at all in that respect. In order to show to people that don't necessarily get it yet the importance of these acts, we've been beginning work on what we call the Fixometer, which is something we're quite excited. It's a project that will be making more obvious the environmental gainings of our work in terms of the tonnage that we save, we prevent in terms of electronic waste, which we're happy to say we've done almost 1.2 tons of electronic waste so far, but also the energy and the water and other resources embedded in the production and therefore in the destruction of such devices. And let's get to the heart of the matter. In the UK, 23% of all the electronics that are responsibly taken to a recycling center are actually either still functioning or economically repairable. What this means is that there is a massive opportunity in helping the public to realize that such stuff should not get into recycling centers to begin with, and we should create new, better ways, smarter ways for our cities to deal with all of this. What it also means, and we're doing some research in this respect, what we find out is often recycling and reuse facilities or centers, even in this very city, claim to be doing more work in reuse than they actually are doing, and we found out that in this very borough of Camden, apart from white goods, nothing else actually gets reused of the things brought to reuse and recycling centers. Only white goods, and the rest just goes on to be recycled without any further question asked. And at the same time, it is globally emerging this wake-up call as the Gaia Foundation, in a memorable animation video that I highly recommend you see, is portraying as this thirst for consumerism, for having the latest, just looking at the innovation that's pushed down to us, often as just as a marketing tool, and trying to reassess what can we do with it. Like, is this new gadget necessary? Is this new version really doing something interesting or useful to us? And while in this country some of these themes have become fairly mainstream, at the same time you look at a picture like that one that I took in Beijing a few months ago, and you see a whole building, 7th floor mall, only selling electronics and as well as parts, of course. But it's becoming so global that it requires a rethinking of how we deal with the issue of how much we produce and consume as well. Of course, at times you realize that a fix would be much cheaper and also fun, as this journalist, L.J. Rich from BBC Click, found out for herself coming to one of our events and repairing her iPad, taking 6 hours, but realizing the limitations driven by design, as well as the fun part that you can have when you do it yourself and you own it for real. And at times it's incredibly cheap, as in less than £1 to fix a PlayStation. So we should look at that. Now, we've come up with a way to visualize why repairing is more important than just recycling. And it looks at the weight that different parts of our use of electronics have. And the production is by far the most energy and resource intensive part. Now, often we are told that we should look at future more energy efficient gadgets and so move on and upgrade because of that. While that is the case for fridges, for example, in the case of electronics, that is definitely not the case. And the more we look at the reform of the way we perceive the economics of the future, the economy of the future, we can see a shift between global economies of production and manufacturing versus an increased focus on local economies of repair and maintenance. And given how we're looking at creating new skills and regaining skills for new, greener local jobs, we think this way of looking at things can probably help us reframe some of the problems around how jobs of the future could be created. Looking at one example before ending, so specifically take something like the iPhone 5S, but the 6 is roughly the same in terms of the difference between the energy required for manufacturing and the energy required for using the device versus the minimal percentage of energy used for the actual recycling. And you'll see that if you extend the amount of use that you get out of a device from the typical 2 years to the 4 years, you'll be increasing the energy consumed by that device within its whole life cycle by a very, very small margin. While the model we are living in now, which promotes recycling first and repair maybe, tends to promote further consumption of newer devices, which has a much higher impact on the resources we use. So that we never really are confronted with such data around the fact that consumption is responsible for 1/7 of the energy involved with the manufacturing of such gadgets. And size matters. If you look at the new versions of the same devices, the amount of energy used in the production continues to expand at worrying rates. Which is why we try to always remind ourselves that as much as the ethical devices of the future and of the present, including the first one, are excellent responses to some of the questions, we should always remember that what we have in our pockets is fairly ethical compared to looking ahead to the next purchase. Thank you very much.